Hello, everybody. My name is Grzegorz Pietrzak. I'm a tech lead in Droptica, and today I will talk about Composer. So exactly 5 years ago, I was here for the first time on DrupalCamp, and I had a presentation in a Magic Chat about the magic of Composer. So I was talking about how to configure it, how to work with it, how to do a proper workflow. And today, after 5 years, I decided to make a summary of it, make another presentation about Composer. Composer as a package manager was released in 2013. There was the first alpha version of it. First stable version was released in 2016. And today we have 2022, and people still don't know how to use it. When we take over projects from in Droptica, there is a lot of hassle with Composer. And also in projects like Mautic or like non-Drupal ones, maintainers often don't know how to work with Composer. So today I wanted to present you a set of don't do it's in Composer. So I will show you 15 like worst practices in my opinion that I'm seeing while working in PHP. And 5 years ago, I was talking about like the white magic of Composer. Today I will talk about this magic that makes people not knowing how to do stuff. Okay, let's do it. So top 15 worst Composer practices ever. Of course, this is my opinion, so probably you can disagree and you will disagree with me, but maybe it will lead to some cool discussion today or after my session. Before I start, I'm talking about a lot about Git repositories. And when I talk about it, it's mostly about development repositories because Composer is not a good thing to run on production sites. So everything what I want to pass to you here is about development repositories, those ones that you work on. So first worst practice that is like everywhere and every time is putting vendors, so those packages downloaded from Composer in repositories. So sometimes it's fully intentional. For example, if you have Composer-based deploys, if you use artifacts, if you have such production infrastructure, but mostly this is like this is caused by lack of knowledge or by some external factors. Sometimes people don't have command line on server. They don't want Composer on production site. They want faster deploys, but they are using only one repository for that. They are putting everything inside. And this is very bad because the repository becomes huge. The differences in this repository are like not manageable at all. Sometimes submodules are detected in Git because packages are cloned instead of downloaded. So actually you are getting a huge repository, you are replicating some contrib history, and you don't want it to in your development flow. So this is the first one. I will talk about it a lot later, so I will skip to next ones. Second bad practice is also putting vendors in webroot, right? So in PHP in general, so if you work with Symfony, it's always advised to keep under the webroot or docroot or however you name the folder that is the entry point of your PHP application. Keep only index.php assets, don't keep vendors there. In Drupal, for example, this rule is not really followed because we have a lot of models, a lot of themes there. So it's very hard to maintain proper flow in Drupal. But in general, let's keep vendors out of webroot. At least in Drupal, it's possible, and it's advised by documentation on Drupal.org. People do it mostly because shared hostings have their limitations, so you cannot set different folder than the webroot for your application. Also, there are a lot of compatibility reasons, like in Drupal, so you have to do it, and you have no other option. So next one is not having the log file in the repository. So until today, if you go into Stack Overflow, you will find thousands of topics about it, how to work with Composer log, how to work with vendors, and until today, people are still claiming that they don't want generated files in Git. So they don't put the log file in the repo. They are relying on their Composer JSON files. And it leads mostly to some unpredicted consequences, because besides of the packages that they define in their Composer JSON file, there are a lot of dependencies that are also versioned and that are also updated. And if you don't keep your Composer log in the repository, you may end up with completely different versions of packages in your production and in your development environments. And also, you are probably running Composer update very often, and it's not good when you are looking on the performance. Fourth bad practice is merging Composer log. People don't like Composer log in their Git because there are a lot of conflicts if you work in parallel with people, and your VCS software may suggest to merge Composer log automatically, and in 19% of cases it will break your application because Composer will complain about the file being not up to date with your Composer JSON. Also, the result of automatic merges can be very unpredicted, and you don't want your application to be broken because of that. And there is no good solution for working with Composer log in Git. Mostly we have some person like tech lead or main developer that is recreating Composer log on merge. So one person knows what happens in application. One person is gathering changes and handling, updating Composer log. Mostly it works, and it's unfortunately it's time consuming, but there is no it's much better than throwing out your Composer log out of Git, right? Point 5, ignoring platform requirements. It's very often that you ask people how their Composer work. It's throwing a lot of errors. People say there's this cool switch, ignore platform requirements, you add it, and everything works. So in this case, you may get unexpected errors because you are downloading packages that are not compatible with your Composer or with your PHP. You can also get wrong dependencies. There's an example for that in our Drupal distribution for Drupal. So if you choose to use PHP 7.2, you will get Drupal 8 because it's that version compatible. If you ignore your platform requirements, you will get Drupal 9, so the latest version. So if you don't know what you are doing, if you are using this switch, you may get a version that is not compatible with your local environment. And it's also a very good practice to declare PHP version in your project, and also declare PHP extensions like JSON or CURL. So in this case, if you look at this project later, if you add some things to your Docker or local environment, you are sure that it's still working. Sixth point, it's kind of controversial, but I think that it's right. It's using Wikimedia Merge. I don't know if you know this plugin. It was developed by the Wikimedia company that is maintaining MediaWiki, so the software behind Wikipedia, and they had a lot of problems with integrating Composer into their software, and they invented something like Wikimedia Merge, and this plugin is merging multiple Composer JSON files into one. You set which folders are to be searched for, and everything is merged into one main Composer JSON file. And it was also used by Drupal, so this is why I'm talking about this. In early Drupal 8 Composer templates, we had Wikimedia Merge everywhere. And in my opinion, using this leads to a lot of mistakes, because people don't know how it works. People don't know what it is, and if there is even some small composer JSON somewhere, it may add some dependency that you don't want in your project. So the project structure becomes very unclean, and there is also a lot of performance penalty. So on Drupal.org there are some discussions about that, about throwing out Wikimedia Merge from composer JSON files. There are also problems with patching when you use it, because some packages may want unpatched version of something, other packages may want other version, and you get multiple downloads of the same package into your project, that and you have no idea what is patched or not there. So this is about the Wikimedia Merge. Let's skip to the next one. Next point is ignoring scaffold packages. So Drupal and other PHP software usually have their own scaffold packages. So when you run your composer install, you get all those scaffolds, index PHPs or htaccess and so on. And people usually tend to ignore the existence of this scaffold package. They are removing those files or replacing them or putting into git ignore or doing things that should be handled by the scaffold package. So if you read the documentation of Drupal scaffold, you will see a lot of cool features like patching those files, like ignoring them sometimes. For example, when you have readmes or files that are not cool to be on production. So I always advise to go to Drupal.org to read this one page about scaffold package and to configure your project in a way that is recommended by Drupal maintainers. Eighth thing is overusing of asset packages. Asset packages is a repository that brings npm and power into your composer. So you may not only use PHP packages in your project, you may also use some front-end libraries. Sometimes it's very cool because you can, for example, download your color box. In Drupal, color box has like 300,000 of installs or more, so it's very widely used. And sometimes it's better to just download it by Composer and forget about it. But generally, I would advise to use for your theming purposes npm, and for your backend purposes Composer. There was one more additional thing with asset packages. It turned out that it's hosted in Ukraine, and right now we have some problems with installing our composers because the infrastructure is not always on, and there are some problems with deploying sites. Point 9 is hard coding your versions. We had a lot of fight also in Droptica about that. If we should use versions like 9.10 and not version constraints. So, for example, greater than 9.10 or some version ranges. When you use hard coding versions, when you do composer update, you will get exactly this version and not the latest one, or the one declared by your version range. So people tend to say that they want to have versioning under control. They don't want Composer to hassle with their package versions. And sometimes they don't want to commit their log file. So this is the good practice only in case when you know that only this package works. So if you know that you have one version of Drupal and the latest or later one will not work, you can use the version in the hard-coded form, right? This is bad because you have to define each time you do the update, you have to define all versions that you hard-coded. Like you have to check which one has updates, which to use. it's pretty hard to manage because those packages also have dependencies, and you have to run a lot of composer updates when you do your application upgrade. 10, and one of the most important points here is confusing version constraints, and it happened a lot while I was working in Composer, because it's very important to know that the star or asterisk is completely different than other constraint symbols. So mostly the tilde symbol is confused with the dash one, and as you can see, you may get completely different outcomes here. For example, if you use the greater sign, you may break your application when some version that has breaking changes was released. Mostly, the recommended one is the dash symbol, so you get all new versions except those breaking ones. So when the first number increases, sometimes we use asterisk ones, but we have to know what we are doing before introducing something like this. And 11 point is also about versions. This is like a niche one, but I think it's very important because we tend to use branches instead of versions. So, for example, we use dev master or dev develop or something like this. Sometimes it's caused by the fact that there are no releases in Git, so we have no option other than use branch in our composer. Sometimes we need specific branch, for example, when we have merge requests in Drupal.org and we want this version and not the other one. But it's very bad because Composer handles branches differently than version packages. So in this case, your package will be cloned from Git and put into your vendor repository. It's much slower, and also if you use GitHub, GitHub will start asking you about the token. So GitHub knows that you are downloading too many packages from it, and after some time you will be restricted as a user that needs token to run Composer install. And this kind of versions are also very bad because you never know if some version that breaks compatibility is coming into your project. So for example, if you tie to master branch and you have commits from version 1 and then version 2 appears, you may not notice that the compatibility was broken. So I would advise always to use version tags here. So now let's go for some production things. Point 12 is not optimizing your projects for production. This is actually a very easy one, and I'm always surprised that it's not widely used. When you deploy your application for production, you should run the O option, the Composer install with O, and this means that your autoload files are generated into a static form. So normally Composer handles autoload dynamically for you to have development possibilities. You can change files, you can delete them, you can add new ones. In this form, this will not be possible, mostly because it depends on the autoload provider. But when you run Composer install with O, for some applications, not Drupal, but I checked it for a few frameworks. For Drupal, I don't have such insight. It may be even 40% faster in terms of PHP to run the code. So classes are discovered faster. They are put into the array that is in op cache, so it's very fast and it's recommended everywhere. And it's not recommended in development environment because your project will not work when you do it. Another thing is not using required dev. So it's always a good idea to separate your packages into the production ones and into the development or testing plans. So in your development environment, you get all of them. In your production, you get only production packages. So this improves your security because for example, in Drupal, you may not want devel module in your on your production, because if somebody enables it, then they may run in Drupal 7, for example, they may run PHP code on your server, and this is a security threat. You also improve performance if you use required dev, because your autoload is smaller. There are a few cons here, because the lack of some packages may break your production, and you have to test a lot to make sure that your production site is working without your dev packages. So you need more time for that. It's definitely something not good here. So point 14 is using ancient composer versions. And this is very common, because if we have some Docker images or some PAR files in repositories, usually those are not updated and not changed, and they are just working, so we don't care about it. And it's very important to know that Composer also has security updates, actually a lot of them. And if you forget about updating Composer, for example, some of your package URL can be hacked. There were a few Composer Armageddons. And if one package is compromised, then your entire application is actually compromised. So it's nice to keep up with security updates here. Also, performance is much better in latest versions. And if you use GitHub, and if you use a lot of branch versions, like I said before, like dev develop or dev master, you will notice that GitHub is no longer working on older composers. So GitHub changed their format of their tokens in May or in April, and older composers are not validating it. So if you want to use GitHub, you have to keep up with the versions of Composer. You may also use Composer 1. It's also maintained. And point 15 will be about transitive dependencies. Transitive dependency is a dependency of dependency. So this dependency that is not intentionally put into project by you, but other packages are requiring it. So it happens that we put not only our intended packages into Composer.json, but for example, some Symfony libraries or stuff that is not intended to be there, but we know that it may be required. So in Drupal, in early Composer templates, we had, for example, some Symfony bar dumpers or things like this. And now when we look at those projects, it's completely not necessary there. We have core dev package in Drupal. We have other packages that are created in a way that we don't have to declare on all the dependencies that are needed. And in this case, if you declare transitive dependency, it may block your updates in the future. So you will start noticing that, for example, those Symfony components will block some update of some module, or will throw you errors on Composer update. Maybe not after a short time, but in the longer period. So we always advise to, if something is not working in Composer, I always advise to remove transitive dependencies, check again, and usually it fixes all the problems. So we have to assume that Composer knows better what it does, and we shouldn't interfere with its logic here. That's actually all. I was very fast because I'm the only thing that between you and your lunch. So so actually, I have a few questions here for you, because we have PHPCon discounts here. I have to invent those questions right now. So first question will be, which year there was the first alpha release of Composer. Yeah, we can. Oh. Oh Jesus. Okay, so what is a transitive dependency? So, okay, the third one. Which section of Composer JSON is for development packages? Okay, so which symbol of version constraints is best to use in your projects to keep your compatibility? Yes, we may accept the answer. Sure. How many more? Okay, so maybe let's pass it to the next speaker because it's very hard to do it. I have one more announcement. Right now, after my session, the drone will be handled to the winner of the game of drones. So we invite you to our Droptica stand, and also there is lunch. So in how much time? Yeah, almost now. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I will answer. Oh no, Mariusz.
Don't worry. You said that there were cases in the past that some of the packages URLs were hacked. And you've also mentioned the first slide, I believe, that it's not a good practice to put the vendor in the repository. So what do you think about the security concerns that one of the packages might be hacked and you simply, without knowing it because you don't have it in your repository, you install the package?
Yeah, it's a good question, but also if you have a lot of vendors in repository, you will never notice that something is broken, to be honest. Because if you do an update, you will get like thousands of files, and it's impossible to go through it in Git. So we have a lot of problems like this. We want to know what changed, but on the other hand, it's like impossible on normal updates to.
Yeah, but there are cases that you simply haven't changed anything in the composer, and let's say you will have a workflow in which in all the deployment pipelines, the vendor directory is cleaned, and the version that were locked will be simply downloaded, and you won't have a chance to know it because you will have locally quite a different version.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think that it can be done on the deployment stage when you build an image or use a deployment repository. Maybe it makes sense to do it at this point, right? So we have entire code, including node modules even, and then you check it, but we don't do it very often.
Okay.